Are you looking to join Cycling Men of Leisure at one of our events this summer?
You know I am.
Well, then where are we going?
Here's what we're doing. We're going to start our ride season off at the very end of May, going through the first week of June at the Big Bragg. We're going across Georgia yet again. Always a good time. Then in July, we are hooking up in Indiana to do Rain. That is a one-day ride across Indiana, 165 miles. Should be a good time. And then we are going to go to the Bourbon Country Burn in September down in Kentucky. We're going to do some riding, and we're going to get to tour some great distilleries and do some tasting. So it's going to be a great time.
I'm really looking forward to all three. Now, I know that normally 160 plus miles does not sound leisurely, but it's one that's been on our bucket list, and we're going to knock it off this year. So if you're looking to join us, you can find us on our social media pages or go to bragg.org, bourboncountryburned.com, and rainride.org. So look for those, and we'd look forward to joining you. Welcome back to Road Adventures of Cycling Men of Leisure. Once again, I am Adam, and today, once again, back in the virtual studio, I am joined with my good friend, Mr. Michael Sharp.
Hello, Adam. How we doing?
Good. I only said welcome back because you and I haven't done this in a long time.
It seems like a long time, doesn't it? Because we had to
2
record
weeks
a
for the
couple
listener.
back there really close because you went on some vacation to paradise and whatnot. So it's been several weeks.
Ladies and gentlemen, Adam went on a cruise. And then I went to a drug and alcohol conference.
Which was a good time because it was in Kansas City and you and I got to hook up. And so that was kind of cool. Hang out and had dinner and some drinks. So that was cool.
Yeah, no, I felt pretty lucky. You know, usually you go on a work trip and you go do your conference and then you're staring at a hotel and my coworker, you got to meet her.
Nikki, yep.
And ironically, so she came out with us the first night and she had a good time. And then the second night, she's like, you know what? I have a husband and 2 sons and a male dog. I would like to just enjoy my room in peace and quiet. She said she went up and took a nap.
That was her polite way to just brush us off going, I don't need any more clowns in my life tonight.
You know what? She says she hears enough of me. So
don't we all?
Well,
moving right along.
It's good to be back here in the studio with you.
It is indeed. And we got some great stuff, I think, for this show, or a great subject for this show.
Yeah.
We kind of teased it last episode, but we've got a really good interview. Before we get to the interview, though, we got some business we got to take care of.
We do. Yeah. We do. Couple things. So let's go back to the time machine. And the time machine I'd like to talk about is March 7th. So March 7th, we had a guest for the listener spotlight that came out while I was out of town. The show came out on the 16th of March, but on March 7th, a friend of the show, our weather aficionado, guy who helped us in Ragbri, Jeff, he wrote us. And he says, I believe I figured out the listener spotlight from the most recent show. He says, South Jordan, Utah. Founded in 1859. Provost Trapper. There had been a group of people here about 1350, but there was no Native American population at the time of the settlement, no permanent native. Latter-day Saints settled here. It was located near Jordan River. Water was diverted for the mill and irrigation. It was in the location of 1938 bus train crash. And then he said, as you were giving clues, my initial thought was northwestern part of the country. Then when you said it was settled by a religious group, I narrowed it down to Utah. And the final place was the bus accident. I read about the history of the crash. And I know that many say it happened in Sandy, Utah, but it was actually South Jordan. So I do believe that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm trying to get it here. It's not coming up as fast. I'm not used to my toys here, but man, can you beat me?
All I got is there you go. Great job.
Nice job, Jeff.
You figured it out.
Got it. Let's see here. On the last show, we talked about some drinks that we had while we were lollygagging around Florida.
Some of the cool drinks, and the fact that I am indeed right here a high roller. According to this coin right here. See?
Wow, look at that. Mm-hmm. High roller. Ladies and gentlemen, there he is from Central Time.
High roller.
We had a drink. Well, you had a drink. You let me taste it. And I put you on the spot during the show, not on purpose. I try not to do that. But I asked you anything about Vermont and a fire and anything of this nature. And you were like, well,
trees that will burn.
It's like a match. So, but on Sunday, Rob wrote us. Mm-hmm. And Rob Menser said, little clue about Michael's Fire in Vermont cocktail contained in the state Vermont in the title. And I don't know, guess I wasn't picking up on that, but I looked at it and sure enough, the label says Whistle Pig Straight Rye Whiskey, hand bottled at the Whistle Pig Farm in Shoreham, Vermont. I gotta say, that's why I think your drink was called
that
Fire
would
in Vermont.
Explain why it was Fire in Vermont. It was Whistle Pig Rye Whiskey.
Yeah.
And there we go. Fire in Vermont. It's not just bottled. It's hand bottled.
That's pretty
Vermont.
Cool.
So there we go. Now, I didn't know that, but that's a little something we'll add to our repertoire of drink information. So
Rob, thank you for taking a little bit to write us and tell us. I like how you even said a little clue. So I was like, oh, I like clues. And then a friend of the show, Johnny, wrote us, but I don't want to beat that until you give the clues. He has a guest for your latest listener spotlight. But besides that, I know I saw you. How you been?
Been good. Just been busy around here with work and all the stuff that comes with spring and owning a home and all of that really fun stuff. So I do have a couple of activities that I did that I would like to get into, but I'm not going to this episode. I got a big one that I'd really like to discuss. It was interesting.
Okay.
But I think we'll wait because the interview is a relatively long interview. So I think we should just get to listener spotlight. We'll go to the interview. We'll end up with listener spotlight, and I'll just save my comments on this activity that I did for later.
Well, now that we knocked the dust off of the equipment here, we can wait a little bit to give people some guesses, and we can get together for another show, my friend.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, in that case, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, man, I am a little rough today. Wow. It is now time for Listener Spotlight.
All right. The last clues that I gave you for this episode's Listener Spotlight are as follows. This town was named for a Confederate general. The city was laid out by the railroad in the late 1800s. And it wasn't incorporated until the early 1900s. Not only was this named for a Civil War Confederate general, one of the reasons for that is him and his soldiers actually had a camp very near where the town is now located. And so that's the reason why it was named for this Confederate general, because he had a camp for a good period of time there locally. The railroad was built through the area in the 1880s. The first industry to this town was lumber. In the 21st century, this town was devastated by a tornado. And if we go back to 1911, the town felt the effects of a major earthquake. My final clue was, this is not the smallest community we have highlighted, but it's very close.
All right. Now, I do have a guess. Sorry about that.
It's not St. Louis.
Oh, man. Fine. Well,
Now, they did feel an earthquake in 1911, but it's not St. Louis.
On behalf of Adam
and Michael,
we both want to say thank you
for your support.
so the following clue is brought to you by DeBrim. Great sun protection for your helmet.
Oh, jeez.
Sorry, Johnny.
Never stops.
Johnny did not say that, but I figured today, I know you and I both try to wear a cycling shirt or something that goes along with the show for the YouTube friends, and you have the Bourbon Burn. I am going to throw a little teaser out there. There just might be some information that I can share in a couple of episodes about something to do with Bourbon Burn. I'm going to leave it at that. All right. Johnny has a guess.
Now you got me wondering.
I know. I might have
keeping secrets.
Well, it's been...
That's fine. That's fine. I keep you surprised enough on the show. It's fair.
That's fair. Right. This one I'm a little sworn to secrecy, but I'm going to see if I can get some permission to share a few hints. So,
now I'm really intrigued. I'll have to listen to the show.
Please do. You can find us on your local podcast.
Excellent. I'll have to look that up.
So Johnny Lampkin. Sorry, Johnny. I've only said your name about 5 times there, but Johnny has guessed. He's guessed before. He says, hey, guys, I'm going to guess listener spotlight is New Madrid, Missouri, with the earthquake, 1911, and cotton grown in the area. Love the podcast. Thanks for the hard work with 2 exclamation points. Then he says Sikeston, Missouri, which is the New Madrid County, Missouri. Left the Sikeston out for some reason. Sorry about that. Well, my friend, how has Johnny done?
Sorry. I will give him credit. There you go.
Man.
New Madrid is a very, very good guess because, in fact, that was kind of the epicenter of the earthquake that I'm referencing in 1911. That's why I also said St. Louis felt a little bit of that effect, as did Kansas City. Things were rocking and rolling, and it messed up the Mississippi River for a couple of days. And it's kind of a major fault line that most people don't realize. But hey, if you're not near Missouri, don't worry about it. Anyway, it is a good guess, but it is not correct.
Okay.
He got in the right area. Our listener spotlight for this episode is, in fact, Marmaduke, Arkansas.
Marmaduke. Wow. Well,
yes.
What a great name.
Up in the northeast corner of the state. Named for Confederate general. It was a Major General John Sappington Marmaduke, who later served as the governor of Missouri. Their first industry was lumber. But during World War II, that land was cleared for cotton production for the war effort. And half the town was destroyed on April 2nd, 2008, when it was hit by a tornado. I've already told you, 1911, the New Madrid Fault earthquake happened. Not the smallest community, but this town, as of 2020, only had 1,212 people. And one of those is our listener. So thank you very much.
Hey, that's 1/1200 of a city that listens.
Well, get a few more cyclists there. We can get a majority of that town to listen to us.
I love it. Well, listen, as I always do, thank you, Marmaduke, Arkansas listeners. Thank you, all listeners. But this time, thank you, Marmaduke. So
Marmaduke.
Yes.
Is that what you said?
It's like, no, I did not. You were
Marmaduke, like the big dog cartoon.
You were correct in correcting me. So, which happens a lot.
Which, if I remember right, their school mascot's like the Greyhound or something, some big dog like that. So
Not a corn husker like I'm seeing on your screen right now.
Cornhusker. No. Yeah.
All right, you are correct. This is a long episode, but listen, we have talked and we teased in the last episode that we chose not to cut anything from this. We like the integrity. Michael and I both believe in the integrity. I actually did listen to the episode, and there was nothing really that needed to be cut. It's a great episode. Just to introduce it, so Franklin Johnson, executive director of Bragg, reached out to me and said, hey, I think a good interview, which he's brought us a lot of people, by the way, but he thought it'd be a good interview to interview the individuals from Bike Virginia, the history of the ride, the future of the ride. And we reached out and we were pointed to the direction of a gentleman by the name of Shane Cusick, and it was a great interview. So without further ado, I'm going to play that now, and we'll come back after the interview and give a few thoughts about it.
And one final thing, he's not just involved with the ride, he also owns a bike company.
For some very special people.
More to follow. It'll be a great interview.
That's right. All right, here we go. Hey, Michael, we have a very special guest with us today.
We do. This is going to be really fun. Really excited. And this is one we've been working on for a while, and schedules haven't quite worked out, but we got everything in place now. So who are we talking to today?
We have a gentleman by the name of Shane Cusick, and he is from Bike Virginia. And Shane, could you please tell us a little bit about yourself? Welcome to Road Adventures of Cycling Men of Leisure.
Welcome.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. Bike Virginia. I've been with Bike Virginia since I started in 2009. Been sort of the longest job I've ever had. And I've been in Richmond, Virginia, is where we're based out of, since 2006. And just a quick plug for Richmond, it is a wonderful cycling community. We had in 2015, we had the UCI Road World Championships here, which is a big thing. And the overall general cycling in and around Richmond is awesome.
That's cool.
And all of Virginia, and honestly, and it's been a really fun, ride, pun intended, for Bike Virginia and the whole, seeing the state and the state itself is a beautiful state. The mountains, the coast, all of it in between. It's a cool place to see, especially by bike.
Virginia's for lovers, according to the license plate, right?
Yes, it is. Yeah, and it's a cool thing. And at first, when I first moved here, I was like, "What is this? Oh, it's kind of weird." And then somebody explained it, and they're like, "Oh, well, it's the lover of the mountains, the lover of the sea, lover of cities,
gotcha.
Lover of the country." Like we have it all. Like we love all of it because it's all part of our state.
That's cool.
Oh yeah, Virginia's beautiful. Adam, I don't know. We've never talked. I don't know if you've ever been to Virginia.
I never have. No. Wait a minute. Fort AP, Virginia, for Jamboree.
Oh, Boy Scout National Jamboree back in the day.
Correct.
Fort AP Hill, Virginia. So you have been to Virginia. Okay. Yeah. I've been through Virginia many times, never been there on a bicycle, so I think I might be missing out.
Okay.
It's big. It's a beautiful state to see by bike for sure.
Cool.
No, the only time I think I was there was for Boy Scouts National Jamboree. And to tell you how long ago that was, President Bush Sr. was president and flew in, and I believe the band The Jets performed. So that tells you how long ago. Yeah. Might have been.
I was there too, but we're not going to get into who the president was or what bands are playing. We're just going to leave that where it's at. So Shane, you hooked up with Bike Virginia in 2009. What's your background? How did you get involved in cycling? Have you always been a cyclist, or?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I I grew up cycling. My dad's side of the family were big cyclists. When I was young, my great uncle, I forget how old I was at the time, but he did the Ride Across America ride, and at the time I was just like I was blown away. I was like, I rode all the way, Uncle Cork rode all the way across the United States. What does that even mean? And then, but we always, like, my grandparents, they would take me on sort of like Bike Virginia rides. They were one-day rides in Ohio as a kid. And we would go. I would hook up with them, and they were all like on the old school 10 speeds, and we would do those rides, and they would be like 25 or 30 mile rides through sort of the Ohio countryside. And then as a family, we every year we had the Cusick family bike ride, which was pretty cool.
Oh, that's cool.
And it was like, yeah, it was like everybody, and it was always at a different host every year. So like it would be at my grandparents one year, my uncles one year, or my dad would host it. But it was cool because the ride, whoever hosted it got to determine the route and all that sort of stuff.
Nice.
And the only requirement was that we had to have a Dairy Queen stop somewhere in the route.
Somebody who understands the power of ice cream. We are huge Dairy Queen fans.
I think we officially stopped the interview and honor Shane as an official honorary member of Cycling Men of Leisure.
He is in. He is in.
Michael and I have been known to find a Dairy Queen after our ride. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when I say family, it was everybody. It was like, like the babies, if there were babies in the family at that time, all the way to grandparents, and we still sort of carried on. My grandparents have passed on, and we still kind of get together on my dad's side, and now it's just mostly siblings and stuff. But we still try to get, at least once a year we'll get in. And in fact, I've hosted the last couple of years. I've hosted the family coming into Richmond, and then we'll do a little ride out of the house. Again, it's everybody. We'll go down the river and swing by. This past year, we swung by my bike shop. So part of my other gig is Pello Bikes, which is a children's bicycle brand. And we stopped in there and had hot chocolate and snacks and stuff like that. So,
and tell every family member you're buying a bicycle.
What's that? I'm sorry?
And tell every family member it's time to pony up and buy a bicycle.
Upgrade.
Yeah, they are. Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's every kid in the family has a Pello.
That's cool.
Nice.
That's cool.
Free of charge. It's a free of charge when you're a sibling.
Cool.
Or a niece or nephew.
So then you're heavily ingrained in cycling.
Right. Yes.
And then you went out and you just thought, you know what? I would love to be involved with some type of organized ride.
Hey, Adam, I need a Coke.
Sounds good. We'll be back after a quick break.
Yeah. And good call to kind of get me back on track. So grew up cycling in this sort of cycling environment, and then it was also motorcycles. My dad was a big dirt bike guy, and so I grew up on two wheels, is what I used to call it, and it would. And now it's sort of like, I kind of call it my two-wheel fix. I got to get out. I don't really ride motorcycles anymore, although my 16-year-old son has a electric dirt bike, which is a whole other world now. But still in the biking thing. And then so progressing through the family and then life. So the bicycle has always been a constant thread throughout my life, and like all the way through high school and then college and then after college. And even after college, so my degree is landscape architecture. And I was in practice, I started practicing in 2001 and then went through and the you guys remember 2008, 2009?
Oh, yeah.
When the economy was, the whole recession thing hit. And I was living in Richmond at the time. I'd sort of graduated college, got married, moved to Charleston, South Carolina, and was working for a landscape architecture firm down there. And I would always sort of, even though I was doing I did some pretty cool projects, like mostly master planning, like large developments and new towns and things like that. But I would always try to figure out where the greenway was or where the bike parking was going to be. And I'd always try to thread that stuff into the projects. And then I sort of, I'd moved from Charleston up to Charlotte and worked for a pretty big firm, a multidisciplinary firm. And from there, I actually started their sort of bike commuting program where they purchased a couple of bikes and we sort of outfitted them with baskets. And we were in downtown Charlotte. So the idea is that, you could go to a meeting on a bike. You didn't have to get in the car and drive. If the meeting was in
Neat.
town, you could just get on the bike and ride. So we had like a small fleet. I kind of started that, which was pretty neat. And then from there, moved to Richmond and sort of still doing the landscape architecture thing. But then on the side, I was working sort of pro bono stuff with the National Park Service. And sort of I was a bit of a liaison between the ASLA, which is the American Society of Landscape Architects, and the National Park Service. And we did a couple of greenway master plans for small communities in Virginia. And this is all sort of pro bono stuff that we would kind of just, like identify, have some meetings with them and things like that. So, yeah. And then the recession came and most of our clients were developers. And you guys know the banks just were not putting any money out. And then so one thing led to another. And I was like, hey, I think I'm out. And so I left the landscape architecture world thinking that I was going to go back to school and focus on alternative transportation in landscape architecture and then go back and teach, and do all this stuff. And one thing led to another, and this position came available with Bike Virginia. And I was like, well, this is kind of a cool thing. I don't have a job right now, so I could get the bike stuff with the advocacy side and do all this stuff mixed in. And and at the time I was on the board for Bike Virginia. And so I resigned from the board and became a staff member in 2009 and sort of changed my whole life trajectory, and it's been a great trajectory. In fact, in 2016, we launched the children's bicycle brand, Pello Bikes. And we sold our first bike in May of 2016, which is kind of fun because May is bike month. So that was kind of a fun thing to do and selling our first bike. And yeah, Pello is still rolling. That's a whole other topic. The bicycle industry on that side is like a whole other world, and especially right now with all the tariff stuff, and then which is always looming, even from the first Trump administration side of things when you imposed all the tariffs. So, and then just the economy around bikes since COVID has been, just kind of like everything's just been flatlined because COVID was this big surge in bikes and purchases, and then the market got saturated with all these bikes that were ordered for, like we were 3 years out on our order. Yeah, from our supplier. And and then finally, that's just kind of like I say, that's a whole other thing to talk about. But so Bike Virginia's been another thread through that whole process too. And yeah, it's been great to just sort of just be entrenched with bicycles for a professional career.
So I have some friends who own a Trek bike store and told me during COVID that some people would buy bikes because, you could go outside, but a lot of it was service. They were servicing bikes and people were getting old, bikes that haven't been serviced in a while. And that was a pretty helpful market. But now, just to kind of resonate with what you're saying, they say that it's really difficult right now, that there's either a lot of stock on the floor or just not a lot of people willing to buy expensive bicycles right now. So now's
the time to buy a bike. Now's the buyer's market for bicycles. So if you're looking for a bike, definitely bikes are still to be had. I don't, like some of the crazy sales, like Specialized is doing 40% off their bikes, and Kona did buy one get one. I mean, it was bonanzas. Like it's like the Wild West right now, and it's still the sort of the phrase in the bicycle, like in that side of the bicycle industry is survive until 25. A lot of brands have gone out of business, and it's like, the bicycle is always going to be there, and people are always going to buy bicycles, but it's just this weird because we had this crazy peak in COVID, and then it's just been down, and there's a lot of stuff too. It's not really down. It's just down from the COVID times. It's still even above pre-COVID numbers, but it just seems like because we have so many more bikes
Mm-hmm.
in the hopper. A quick side note for that is during the first Trump administration, when he put all those tariffs up for China, the bicycle industry sort of, they didn't hit pause, but there was a lot less, like as far as in the United States, there was a lot less bicycle stock as far as like being warehoused or in bike shops or things like that. And then when COVID hit, because of the tariffs and stuff, and then when COVID came around, everybody wanted bikes because you could ride outside. So people were buying whatever, like they were just buying. And so there was already this like shortage, and I'm talking like it was like about the last time those like the overall stock of bicycles was this low was about 20 years ago. Prior to that,
Wow.
so we had low stock, in the warehouses, and then everybody bought all that, and then nobody could get bikes because it was just this global demand for bicycles went through the roof, and then everybody kind of like did all their stuff. So there was kind of like this like 1-2 punch in the bicycle industry from that. Like had Trump not done that, then we might have had like pretty decent stock level, and then COVID could have absorbed hundreds of more thousands of bicycles at that time.
Right.
We'd probably still be in the same weird spot, but it's just a weird side note that the tariffs kind of things that the tariffs affect that you don't really.
No, I appreciate you mentioning that. I remember during COVID, the Shimano and SRAM, everyone kept saying, gobble up the gears, gobble up the cables, gobble up everything because there's a shortage. And so things that, Shimano 105, which was, you could buy it on any bike and any random afternoon or whatever. So it was definitely an interesting thing. So you get involved with Bike Virginia in 2009 as a staff member, and then what was the progression? Were you just a staff member moved up into like management, or?
Hey, Michael, I need a coffee.
Okay, we'll be back right after this message.
Yeah, so Bike Virginia is a pretty small organization, and when I came on, Kim had just sort of became the executive director in 2008. Was her sort of first round, and prior to that, Bike Virginia had a lot of I think they had, I want to say close to 10 people working for them and various different things. So Bike Virginia at that time had grants with the DMV. They had some other stuff that they were kind of working around, but they were also in a pretty financial, not great place.
Okay.
And so Kim kind of came on, the old director stepped off, Alan Turnbull, which is he was the founder, sort of the godfather, he's an awesome guy. He kind of showed me the ropes a little bit too. It's kind of neat to kind of get to have him show me how to do some signage stuff in the early days. But it was just, there was a lot of things that Bike Virginia was involved with. And it was, the organization at that time, can't do my math, but the first tour was 1988.
Okay.
So it was still, it had enough time to kind of reach its tentacles in a lot of things. And I think that there's too many things out there. So when Kim came on, she kind of in a way, sort of cleaned house, and it was her. And when she hired me, it was me.
Okay.
Restructuring everything. At the time, my first Bike Virginia tour was 2010, my first actual managing the tour. And at that time, it was a 2,000 person tour. And, coming from a landscape architecture side, I love bikes, but I'd never stepped into the realm of trying to organize 2,000 people for 6 days out in the countryside of Virginia. And that was a whole other perspective. And thank God we hired on.
Imagine.
Yeah, and thank God, we hired on Wayne Goodman, which is a local legend in for trail building here in Richmond, to sort of help with some of the IT stuff and the registration stuff, which is a whole, you can imagine 2,000 registrants with different packages and all that stuff, and how all that can kind of get jumbled up. And so thankfully he came on. He kind of handled that. Kim kind of took care of all the like high level stuff, and then I was sort of the route / organizer, everything in between. And it was just a wild ride that first year. I mean, it was just crazy, and it was like it's one of those experiences that you go through, and maybe you guys have had those in your life where it's like you get in it, and it's so overwhelming that you're like time is almost still, like it seems like it's like not moving, but at the same time it's like, oh my God, that's 6 days ago, and I can't, because when the tour is running, my day on the tour is about it's like 14, 15, 16 hours.
Oh yeah.
So we get up at I was part of the signage team, and kind of organized the signage team, and we would start putting signs out at 4 a.m. and then we'd pull them around 5, and then all the other stuff, logistical sort of stuff that would happen in the evening. I would just sort of do this route wrap every evening, and then take care of so many other things that are happening around our headquarters area. And
putting out fires left and right.
Yeah, and then it was like a circus, and it was so funny. It's like no matter how much planning we did over all the years, and I mean I was at it for quite a few years, it would always be a circus. It wouldn't matter. Like it would we'd have everything, like all the checks, everything, but then a rest stop would just they said we can't do it. And they're like, we got 2,000 people coming here to church. You got to do something for us. So it would just be stuff like that all the time. And that's the thing, we're working with volunteers and communities, and then there's cyclists that are the Bike Virginia is in probably a similar demographic to all the rides we mentioned before, but you've got a wide range. So anywhere from an 80-year-old to an 8-year-old.
Yeah.
And then you got the hardcore cyclists, and then you got the leisure riding around cyclists, the tourists, I like to call them. And then you got all the people that live there in the community.
Mm-hmm.
And we're at that time when we were 2,000 people, it was like a swarm. We would almost swarm these communities with bikes.
Yeah.
And so, we always, and we were always straight up with everybody, with VDOT, with the police, with everybody. So everybody knew that we were coming. It wasn't like it was a surprise, but the residents, even there was PSAs and stuff that would go out, but who really listens to that stuff, especially if you're not into cycling. And then people get all pissed off because there's so many bikes and they can't get to work, or it takes them an extra minute to get to work. So it was an exhilarating experience to be the tour director.
Now, what's funny is, Shane, we've had multiple bike event directors on our show. From Michigan and Iowa. We've had Matt from Iowa and Franklin from Bragg. And so we've talked to a lot of them, and it's amazing. They're saying exactly the same thing. Even though from Adam and I are always just like, oh my gosh, how does this, it seems so seamless, but they're like, we're frantically behind the scenes, putting out fires and solving all this. But you know what? 9 times out of 10 to the cyclists, I mean, it just seems like everything's going exactly as planned. So
and that's exactly
we've certainly heard that many times before about that. So
the only time I ever saw a little bit of, I guess I'll say anxiety, was Neil, our director and friend from Michigan. He was sitting relaxing with a bunch of cyclists, from Shoreline. And he said he was just relaxing, and how's the ride? How is everything? Anything I can do for you guys? And we're like, no, today was a perfect day, and it was a beautiful weather day. The route was great. And all of a sudden, he looked down at his watch and he goes, "Okay, I got to go. I've got 100 miles to drive." And we're like, 100 miles to drive? And he goes, "I got to go put the signs up." And sure enough, and that was kind of the one maybe a time that I saw one of the directors go, "Oh my gosh, I have a job to do now." And then we saw him at 5 a.m. He's like, "All right, guys, you ready to hit the road?" And we're like, "Yeah. Do you ever sleep?" So,
it's wild, man. It's a wild existence, and it's crazy because the multi-day tours, like Bike Virginia was 6 days, and it was really like 2 weeks leading up was like pretty intense. Definitely like 10-hour days usually all the way up to it, and then almost like 18 hours or whatever, and then but it was just this like you start that first day, and then you've got all the adrenaline, and you're planning this thing for a year and all this stuff, and you're like, yeah, okay, all right, we're rolling. And then the second day rolls on, and you're just kind of like, okay. And then by the third day, I usually get like this, like, oh. And then our format was we were in one place for 3 days, and then we'd move to another place for 3 days.
Okay.
So we would move all of our equipment and all of our gear and everything, and start in a whole new location on the fourth day.
Okay.
And through that move, you just kind of like, man, I could feel myself dragging. And I always had it all the years that I did this, like it was just this process of like, because it was just these crazy long hours, and it was a mental and a physical exertion for 18 hours too. You're just like you say, putting out fires or talking to the sheriff, or like you're talking to riders, doing all this stuff. Why isn't the rest stop doing this? Or like all these things. But then about the fifth day, you start, like, my body would kind of acclimate to the time and then the stress and all that stuff. And by the sixth day, it's like, oh man. And then when the tour is over, I would have all this energy for like a week of just like, all right, I want to be, you adjust to that schedule and that intensity. And then it's like, it's cut off. And you're like, oh, well, I got to do something.
Now what?
Yeah, but it was a wild ride.
So I have a couple questions. The tour in 2024 took place in June 21st through 26th, according to the website. And you said that it was 6 days normally. Would it always be in June?
It was, yes. It was always that sort of last week in June.
Okay.
And that was sort of set up by our predecessors because that was a good time. It wasn't quite summer in Virginia. It wasn't quite, winter, so you could kind of have some decent weather usually.
Okay.
And then it also worked for schools. So schools were out.
Oh yeah.
So that allowed, participants didn't have to worry about the school. If they had kids and stuff, they could come to us. But then for us too, as the tour, we didn't have to worry about the schools being in session. So we didn't have to worry about school traffic and buses and high schoolers driving to school and all that sort of stuff. So that last week in June was always a sort of our sweet spot.
And then my second question would be, a few times when you were saying it was, does that lead to the Bike Virginia's going in a different direction?
Yes. Yeah. That's sort of where we're at right now. And the 2025 Bike Virginia we had our last Bike Virginia last year, and it wasn't really the Bike Virginia that we had in the past, and we haven't, as a tour, as far as the registrants and participants, hasn't really rebounded since COVID. And even like leading into COVID, we could see our yearly registrations were just kind of slowly dropping down, but they would still hover 1,000 to 1,500, where it was always sort of pre-COVID stuff. And then once COVID hit, everybody kind of like did whatever their thing was they were doing. And then when we came back 2 years ago was our first tour after COVID, we didn't have that many people, and we had to, we honored all of those COVID registrations.
Okay.
So anybody that had registered for COVID could still ride in the tour. And like they had up to 3 years to cash in your registration. And then, so that was our, that was a lot on our books as far as like trying to carry that through.
Sure.
And then, so we satisfied that debt, or that, not that debt, but just that obligation that we put on the tour. And then this past year in 2024, we geared up and did some things. And then it just was, I think we had 450 people that registered. So it was, and it's, the tour is it's a funny thing because it's, I guess like any business, there's an economy of scale, right? So it's kind of like we have to lay all this stuff out, whether it's 500 people or 2,000 people. It's kind of like, I kind of like describe it as like when you go camping or when you go bike packing. You have to take your bag, your tent, your gear, everything. You got to take everything, whether you're going for 2 days or 2 months. You got to take the same stuff. So the tour is kind of like that. We have to prepare it no matter how many participants we have. I mean, we can scale certain things, of course, but as far as the overall planning goes, like, all the counties and municipalities and everything that we work with. So, yeah, it was a much, much smaller tour in the past. And so that sort of led to, like, okay, we need to really look at what's going on. And, as we'd mentioned before, Cycle Oregon closed down their week tour. Bike Florida, Ride the Rockies.
Ride the Rockies. Yep.
So, yeah. So everybody's kind of like, all right, we got to change. This is just not working anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of it is probably, you probably heard this from your other directors too, but it's not just one thing, but multiple things.
Yeah.
And COVID was certainly one of those multiple pieces that kind of, and it's funny because, I think COVID also sort of shifted how it kind of like jumbled us all up as far as like, culture even. And I think it led to more people they're not doing organized rides like they used to in the traditional kind of way. And then I think one of the bigger pieces of the puzzle is the demographic. The Bike Virginia sweet spot is the baby boomers. And, the baby boomers are, they're sort of aging out of doing events like this. And the younger generation just doesn't do this. Like they just don't, like I'm a Gen Xer and I don't do these kind of rides. I mean, and then another wheel in the whole cog of this is road cycling is kind of, like, yeah, it's just because, and I think it's not really the sport, it's more just the safety around road cycling, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm a big biker and I used to ride my road bike all the time, but now it just kind of collects dust because I don't, and if I do ride it, I go out on our multi-use trail or I take roads to get there, but it's just, it's a different environment than it was in the heyday of these big bike tours.
Sure.
And there's
I think you're right. I think you're right. I tease my friends because I'm always like, you guys do know that they created asphalt, which is nice and smooth. You don't have to go ride your bike on the gravel. But their answer is always, yeah, but if I go on the gravel roads, a 4,000-pound SUV is not going to plow me over. So
there's no guarantees.
That's true.
That's out there too, but there are fewer of them, and generally you hope that they're on the gravel road, they're not quite as distracted as if they're just going around their house or wherever. So
it's funny you bring that up because we've talked about this on many, many episodes in this show about the changing demographics. And we've been on some rides where, we were the young guys on the rides, exactly. So we've seen that and we've seen all this. So it's one of those things that we've looked at a lot. In fact, there's a ride we're doing this year that they originally said they weren't going to do. And then they came out and said, oh, yeah, we're going to do it. And it's kind of looking like the last year. So we hopped on that just because we've done it before. It's a good ride. We thought, if this is the last year, we want to be involved with it. So, I wish I could take what you're saying and go, that's completely ridiculous. But no, that's just really where we're at right now in cycling. And everything goes in cycles. So hopefully things will start changing and those demographics will start getting younger and stuff. But, we're just in one of those spots right now.
I remember reading an article. This is totally a guess, maybe 15 years ago that cycling was the new golf instead of you and your.
Oh, I remember that. Yep.
Yeah, because they would say, instead of your business partner, you and guys going golfing for the day, you would get your bikes out and go for like a trail ride together and have that camaraderie on a bicycle. And then during COVID, I think golf just came back like like gangbusters. And so my career is in transportation, and we actually use COVID as a defining moment. We actually say, do we have pre-COVID numbers or post-COVID numbers? Because coming out of COVID, people were afraid to be on public transportation buses, in confined spaces, and they were afraid. I can announce that in 2025, we were actually pre-COVID numbers, and so that's great. But I know what you're saying is you're speaking right to the choir, and we always wonder, like the younger generation, is it video games? Is it the fact that they just don't even want driver's licenses now? That they're fine jumping in a Uber or Lyft? Michael and I have spent more time than I'm proud to tell you discussing, like, when we were kids, we were scouts and we'd get on bikes and ride miles and miles and miles. And then as an adult, everyone comes back to cycling for one reason or another. Either they enjoyed it so much. Mine was a health weight loss journey where my neighbor said, "Hey, you should get a bicycle." And I was like, "A bicycle? I haven't ridden a bicycle since high school." And then now it's, just every day.
Here we are.
Yeah, here we are. So
you got a podcast, everything about it.
I know. That came out of an idea of an
accord. Cycling kind of just, it just gets into your system.
Oh, yeah. And that does, we've often told on this show, that's how Adam and I became friends. We met on a ride
so cool.
and started riding together. And now we've ridden across, I don't know how many different states and how many different rides. And we go out and golfing events together, and we enjoy an occasional bourbon together. And
I see all the bottles in the background.
Well,
that's not 3D. So
Adam's got a problem, but we're working on it.
There's a 1-800 number for that.
Yeah, there is.
Okay.
There's
but,
also intervention
group. Is
group.
there Pappy back there?
I don't have Pappy, but I do have a George T. Stagg.
Oh, wow.
Oh yeah, he found a wonderful find.
Yeah, so this is I do have a nice George.
Oh, wow.
There we go. So no Pappy though. I have had it. But no, but yes, I always say make friends with your liquor managers. It's extremely important. So,
I scored a bottle of Buffalo Trace recently at my local liquor store.
Nice.
And I wasn't even anything. And this customer that was in front of me, he's like, they got that over there. And I'm like, what? Yeah. And it was like $28 or something.
I know.
And it's total retail price. Yeah.
It's so good. Like,
it is.
Such a good bourbon.
And it's just depending, like even at our local grocery store, people, I'm sure they're hoarding it, like behind me here, but they, it's like, I'll see it one day, like 7 on the shelf. I'll go the next day to pick up a few items and the whole shelf is empty. So there we go.
Oh yeah. I got a few bottles sticking around too. I just don't put them in my background, but but Shane, if you ever want to ride, you should check out Bourbon Country Burn.
I've heard about it. Yeah,
we've done it.
It's a couple. Is it a couple that does it? Or
yes,
it is.
Yeah, we've done it a couple of years, and it's a lot of fun. So
they put out a very vague email leading to or alluding to that this was, it was an idea for them, and just like Bike Virginia was for somebody down the line, but they enjoyed it, but now they have family, they've had children, and that they weren't sure where it was going to go, and this may be the last one. So either they're great into sales and marketing, and we are hook, line, and sinker like the old catfish bait, and here we are. The only problem, in our personal opinion, is the ride is very similar, where the routes are the same, and
routes are the same year after year.
It's difficult. So for us, being our love of bourbon and the enjoying of going to some of the distilleries, we'd like to see different distilleries or whatever. And so, but we felt that being the last year that this is the podcast, and we can, maybe
these are our kind of people.
I was going to say, maybe it's just a great
this is our target market right here. Yeah.
So, but go ahead, Michael.
I was saying, getting back now that we've kind of going down rabbit holes here, but
bourbon.
Bourbon. Nothing wrong with that. So you guys are getting away. What you got plans to shake it up? What's the future look like? What are you guys thinking?
Yeah, and it's sort of, the organization is 30 plus years old, so it's and it's a nonprofit, so it's not easy to kind of break out and like figure out, well, what are we gonna do? Like we were doing all this stuff, and there's a million ideas, like from the board members to friends to, all these different concepts of what to do, and it's amazing. I mean, you guys experience this, but when you're into something, everybody has an idea.
Oh, sure.
Everybody is like, oh, you can do this, or you should do this, and you should do that, and it's like, yeah, it's a great idea. So we reached out. We had a great call with the director out at Cycle Oregon, and they're doing some cool stuff over there. Really opening up a whole advocacy side, and they're doing some rides, but the rides are just not. They don't really pay the bills that much. So they're branching out in different areas, and so we're doing something similar. Our path forward, we haven't really announced too much of it yet. We're kind of still trying to figure out how it's all going to work. Is sort of have kind of two arms of Bike Virginia, and Bike Virginia in the past has been in and out of advocacy. Like I was saying, like working with the DMV and sort of advocacy at the state level, and so we're hoping to reopen that up and work with communities around Virginia or Mid-Atlantic or even, the whole U.S. for that matter. Because I think collectively between Kim and I and Sam, we have a lot of collective knowledge about stuff like active recreation and tourism and how to put on events and things that could be valuable for communities looking for, like how do we, get rid of, obesity in our community, or how do we, attract tourism in our community? How do we, do these different things that we could help them? So we're hoping to sort of have a consulting arm to help communities with the knowledge that we have. And then also still put on events, but smaller, not the big tour anymore. One of the things that we're looking at is like even like real small, like 20 to 40 people, and more kind of like a back roads style tour. If you guys know those guys, back road touring.
Yep.
Yeah. But sort of like all inclusive, and it's kind of like everything is there, and it's sort of nice and all that sort of stuff. And then maybe even just like 1 or 2 day events. So that's kind of our path forward, is sort of that consulting side and then events. And just so you guys know too, all the staff at Bike Virginia was furloughed in July.
Okay.
So we were all, like after the tour, shortly after the tour, we were all let go, and just kind of it was like, wow, like I say, it was the longest job I've ever had. And so it was, from a financial situation, it's like, oh, now I don't have the income that I had. Yeah. And then also just from a psychological, like, wow, like it's the end of an era for me. It was 15 years in this sort of space, and now it's not really there. So
back to landscaping.
And I've done some of that, and I've thought about like, okay, well, dust off some stuff. In fact, I got a friend he's got a couple of development projects, and he wants me to kind of give him a proposal for stuff, and I'm like, I've got knowledge, but it's like 15-year-old knowledge. I got to knock the dust off of it and get back into it.
Well, I've got a half an acre behind my house that needs help. I mean, you could start there,
There you go. Yeah.
I charge him a lot, Shane.
Hey, Bourbon, I can
there you go. Yeah, I can hook you up. Yeah.
You got to do the work first, then we can provide. I'm just kidding.
That's true. That could get a little floppy.
But I from a personal standpoint, you talked about you kind of hit home. You don't know you hit home, but I'll tell you hit home. In 2008 and 9, I lost 2 full-time jobs within like a week and a half of each other almost. And, I started over, and that's kind of definitely like talk about a slap of reality. And so I can completely understand where that came from. And we just interviewed some people from Padre Cycling, a charter that are doing a little intimate kind of thing. And so, and Michael actually always does away from the show, not recorded, but Michael will talk to me about, there's a lot of people who can't, if you start, like, let's just say, just for a second, COVID, and you were in a career and you start over and you have to have new benefits at a new job, and you get 2 weeks off of work with your new vacation, and you have a family, go home and tell your wife that you're going to spend one of the 2 weeks that you have, and you're going to do a week-long bike tour. Exactly. Tell me how that goes. And so I think your idea of having some, maybe 1 or 2 day deals, or maybe one overnight deal, or some, I think that's actually really, more intimate rides. I think it was described to me as the way you were looking at it. So,
and Adam and I have talked about this, because we generally do generally do 2 week-long rides every year. We try to mix it up. But we've often talked about getting involved in more of just like the 2-day weekend type rides and things like that. And we, from our point of view, have often thought, we need to get into more of those type of rides, which would allow us to get out and see more places and things like that. So you might be onto something there.
Yeah, thank you.
And see, we're kind of both lucky. We both have careers that allow us to remote work. And so we actually, when we're on these cycling tours, many times we don't really advertise this a lot, but we actually have laptops in our bags. And then we might sit down. I'm not going to lie. We sit down at dinner, and then there's a bourbon usually, but then we're banging away emails and everything and doing work from the road. So we make it work the way we make it work. And then some people online will be like, we want your jobs. You're always gone. I'm like, well, I don't know if you know.
We're working most of the time, but there's time after work though that we can, have some fun and enjoyment. So
well, that's totally awesome. And I've been working from home since about 2011-ish.
Wow.
We kind of did away with our office. So you're right. It seems like you have, from the outside, like you have all this time, but you're kind of always working. Like you're not always taking a bunch of time off, but you're sort of always hanging it, whether it's like an hour a day
Friday.
or
That's
an
what
hour
I tell
a
my
day.
family. No, there's no Monday through Friday. There's like when I was.
There is for me, but
whatever. I don't work for some of us don't work for the federal government. Some of us have to work for county government, but I tell my family that, in the old days, I oversee 84 employees, I think. In the old days, Friday nights, you did not call your boss on the weekend. I mean, the place had to be burning down or something.
Right.
And nowadays, it could be Saturday night. And my wife will, all the time. I mean, I understand where she's coming from, by the way. She's like, are you getting paid to take those calls on Saturday night? I'm like, well, yeah, it's kind of part of the gig. So but there is no filter anymore. So
yep, you're right, and I like it. I mean, it's a change, right? It's just like everything that we've been talking about. It's always a change, and this, and I've kind of adopted this phrase, but change is the one constant, and
absolutely,
and everything is going to change, and it's just like the bicycle industry is changing, the bicycle tour industry is changing, and because people are changing, it's the people that did the events are moving on. They're aging out, and the people that are younger are just not doing those events anymore. They're doing other stuff. They're still riding. But it's just different. It's more like group rides with buddies and friends than it is organized. And even if it's organized, especially like just local Richmond stuff, they're pretty good rides, but they're all free. It's just like a bike shop says, hey, we're doing this big dumb ride. Come ride with us. And, 100 people, 50 people will show up for the ride. And it's not supported, and you've got your ride and GPS computer and you're kind of on your own. But that's kind of the younger gen under the boomers. That's more their style than, the boomers like I think coming from the structure and like,
structure. Exactly.
I want to pay it. I want to pay this thing, and I want to know everything is there, and I want to ride my bike. And it's like nowadays, just like us working from home, they didn't work from home. They probably they checked they hit a time clock and did all kinds of stuff. It's different. It's all just change. And change can be uncomfortable, but it at the end of the day, it's still just change.
It's going to happen. So,
Exactly.
tell us a little bit about Pello Bikes, if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah. So Pello, as I mentioned before, we sold our first bike in May of 2016, and we've been, it's been a roller coaster too. So when we started the company, it is a children specific bicycle company. And just a quick backstory on how it even the concept was launched was, um, I, being a cyclist myself and, all into bikes and that stuff, I didn't realize how crappy kids' bikes were until I had kids and really had to get them a bike. And I was like, we had some hand-me-downs at first, but then my now 16-year-old, at the time, he was 6, I think, or maybe 5. But we rode our bikes down to the local bike shop and got him a 20-inch Cannondale single speed. And it wasn't cheap. It was like $300.
Sure.
And we rode it back, and I started really kind of checking it out. And the geometry was cool, but it was heavy. It was really heavy, and it had cheap parts on it, and that sort of stuff. So I'm like, all right. I started rummaging through my bins. I'm like, maybe I can find a lighter cheap post, and I do different things. And then it's just like a light bulb went off. Like, why doesn't somebody make a better bike? And then the research started and all this stuff, and you guys know the bicycle industry is just like it's a red ocean. Everybody is always like competing and trying to get
Sure.
300. There's 300 people that make saddles.
Yeah.
So everything in the bicycle industry is like occupied. But this like one little niche of good quality, lightweight kids bikes was not really being filled.
That's cool.
And that kind of opened my eyes to it. And then next thing you know, I'm in Taiwan, the Taipei Cycle Show, and talking to like different, builders and all this different stuff. And and then it kind of led down that road, and we had 4 bikes to start in that 2016. And just as a comparison, our single speed 20-inch bike was 7 pounds lighter than the Cannondale.
Wow.
And only $50 more. So ours was $350 versus $300. So it was kind of like sort of moment. And then Pello has we've been cruising along. COVID was wild. That was kind of, we were sort of making it. And at the time there was only when we launched the brand, there was one other company, and they were out of UK. They're called Isla Bikes. And she was doing something similar, but you couldn't get them in the U.S. And then right as we're launching, another brand came up in the U.S. called Cleary Bikes, out of California. And then another brand popped up, Woom, WOOM. They're an Austrian company, but they have a thing out in Texas. And then another brand, Prevelo, opened up. So it's still a small little niche. And then the big boys have also improved their bicycles.
Sure.
They've made their kids' bikes better over the years. And I think partly because of small brands like us kind of making it better. And then we were just kind of chucking along, and the market still was kind of there, and I was still doing Bike Virginia stuff. And then COVID came along, and it's like, man, we sold all the bikes we had. And then we got another container and sold that whole container off. And then we went to order more, and it was like 2 to 3 years before we could get bikes.
Wow.
So the supply chain just went ballistic.
Reaching halt.
Yeah, and it not a screeching halt. It was like full. It was turned to 11, but the line was just around the world to get bikes. So everybody needed stuff. So going back to SRAM and Shimano, those guys were. We switched. Our geared bikes were running SRAM at the time, and we switched to Shimano for that next batch because shorter lead time. SRAM was like 400 days of lead time.
Wow.
And Shimano was like 300. So it was still over a year. But it was a little bit better. And then since then, so you can imagine, we didn't have bikes for 3 years. So cash flow was like non-existent. I just kind of put it in hibernation mode. We moved into a much smaller space, and and just waited on our bikes. And then our bikes came back, or they came to us after, waiting for a couple of 3 years. And then the whole market is not, just doesn't support what it used to support.
Yeah.
So then it was just taking us a long time to sell bikes. We're pretty much sold out of the bikes that we had from that COVID order, but it took a long time, and we're a small company. So now we're kind of we're working on bikes, and we're hoping to get another shipment this spring or fall, and it's a full revamp of our lineup. We're doing some really cool stuff, like all of our drivetrains now. So we've got three geared bikes out of our lineup. We've got all the way from a balance bike. You guys know those little bikes that there's no pedals or anything on them.
Yeah.
All the way, we've got that, which is a 12-inch wheel, and then a 14-inch pedal bike, and then a 16-inch pedal bike, and a 20-inch pedal bike. And those are all single feeds. And then we have a 20-inch geared bike, a 24-inch geared bike, and a 27.5-inch geared bike. And one of the cool things we're doing on those is we're switching all the drivetrain to this company called Box Component. I don't know if you guys know those guys.
I don't
think
I've heard of them.
Yeah, they're based out of California, and they're pretty cool. I talked to them. They're huge in the BMX world. So Box Components are huge in the BMX side, but they've gotten into drivetrains, like mountain bike drivetrains. So one of the reasons that we're partnering with them on our next batch of bikes is one, they're a U.S. company, and we it's been sort of from the beginning of Pello, we sort of tried anywhere we can. In fact, when I started the company, I was like, there's got to be a way. There's got to be a way to make these bikes in the U.S. And it just wasn't. Like at the time in 2000, well, really started the idea in 2014, but, at that time, 97% of all the bikes produced in the world were produced in China. And 2% were produced, 95%, and then 2% were produced in Taiwan. So that left 3% for the rest of the world for bicycle production. So if you were going to make any, like you can get cool ass custom bikes in the U.S. no problem. I've got friends that are custom frame builders, and that's just different. That's a whole different world. But if any sort of volume of a bicycle, China was where it's at, and they built a village around it. Just like
Foxconn for Apple.
Yeah. I mean, it's just it's kind of neat because the infrastructure, and this is why everybody kind of all the tariff stuff. I don't want to get on too much of a tangent, but like all the tariff stuff is like, yeah, we're trying to make more production in the U.S., but the weird part about it is that when you put the tariffs on it, it's not the Chinese that are paying it. It's
me. Yeah, exactly.
And then ultimately it gets tried to get passed on. We still absorb a bunch, but it tries to get passed on to the customer. So it's a weird thing. And then it's like, oh, well, if you're charging us all this money, how can we even think about trying to produce anything, in the U.S.? So it's like, and then if you look at China and Taiwan, they built this infrastructure, and it's like I say, it's like a village. So, like you'll have the assembler, which is like what our manufacturer does. They build the frames, and then they gather all the components, and then they assemble the bikes. They paint them and do all that stuff too. But like where they are, just down the street is the cardboard guy, and just down the street is Kenda tires. So they can just quickly get stuff. It's not like us. Even if we do try to build bikes, everything is still imported. All the parts, Shimano comes from Malaysia, or like all the tubing is still coming from China, or like all this sort of stuff. So they've built that network over there.
Oh yeah.
That we used to have. We used to have it here, but just like we've kind of all of our manufacturing, through our U.S. history is like, we're more. I feel like we're more design, intellectual type stuff in the U.S. I think we're going to get more back to manufacturing just because we got a lot of people, that need a lot of jobs, and those are great jobs. Manufacturing jobs are good jobs. So, gosh, what was I even going with that?
I think you're 100% on, because you look at like Detroit. in the 40s and the 50s and in the 30s, all that. I mean, that's what you're talking, a village. Everything that you needed to buy to build an automobile was being produced in Detroit, from the seats to the tires to everything. So you're exactly right. It's hard to overcome that. But I do want to give you kudos, because we've often talked, Adam, that one of the biggest things is the younger generation is not getting into cycling. And you know what? If you make those bicycles lighter, it's going to make it more enjoyable for them. And then there's a better chance that they're going to continue doing that as they go. Because I remember when I was a kid, I mean, the bike weighed a ton. Right. I mean, it was my freedom, but I looked at cycling different than the young kids. But you make those frames lighter, make it more enjoyable for them, and we have a better chance of hooking them to, start a lifelong, cycling journey. So
I was a kid in the 80s, and I had a BMX Huffy before my parents finally said,
it was a mighty fine Huffy, too.
By gosh, it was chrome, and I broke the frame on a jump, but that's not important right now. But then I got a GT Performer, because my dad had said, he said, my son's getting into all this crazy stuff. And the guy said, I'd get him something a little higher quality. Otherwise, he's going to get hurt. And so, but that's a great point. And I have a question real quick. You said a balance bike. I see the word Strider. Is Strider a brand, or is balance bike? A Strider's a brand of a balance bike.
Yeah. So Strider is kind of like the Kleenex. Like, what do you say when you need a tissue? You say, you got a Kleenex. So it's kind of like Strider. And Strider, I mean, to their credit, they popularized the whole balance bike market, and which is it's a funny thing. I always kind of chuckle on the inside, because like a balance bike is really the first bicycle. You look way back, the first bicycle was like 2 wagon wheels with a thing in the middle, no crank. You just used your feet to glide along with it. So it's kind of funny. So Strider is a brand.
A brand. Yeah. Okay. So because because in my neighbor, I live in a subdivision here, and I see the kids going around and they pass the Strider brand bike around. Once their kid outgrows it, then they go to the neighbor, to the neighbor, to the neighbor, to the neighbor. So, but I always said, my father taught me how to ride a bike, and some may think this is cruel, but we lived out in the country in Illinois, and there was a lot of hills, and there was an old apple orchard, and he took me to the top of the hill, and I'm not kidding you, when he would hold on to the seat for a while, and then eventually he just kind of gave a little push, and and it was grass and dirt, and then that was it. I mean, now my golf partner and great friend, his grandson had one of those balance bikes for a while, and then finally they gave him a regular bike. That afternoon, they took the training wheels off. So
I tell you, it's like the balance bike has it's transformed, like, not only how quickly kids get into cycling or are able to cycle, but also sort of like how they do it. Because it's with it, like, both of my boys, they were on the Strider, and they started pedaling. They're like, my oldest started pedaling his first pedal bike at 2. Like, he was pedaling a bicycle and riding a bicycle at 2 years old. It's crazy.
That's awesome.
In our generation, it was like 7, 8, 10. It wasn't uncommon. That was kind of, nobody really thought about it. But if you think about a balance bike from a kid's perspective, it's like, and I tell this to parents all the time too. I'm like, just get the bike, even when they're 1, and just put it in the house. And then they think it's like a toy, and they pick it up and they do these things. And what they're doing is they're learning balance. And what are 3 components to cycling? There's balance, braking, and pedaling. Right? You have to have those 3 things to ride a bicycle.
Michael, what do you always say?
What? You don't need brakes?
No, you can't coast forever.
That's debatable.
No, my saying is, and it's on my watch here on my little band thing, is you can't coast forever. So,
there you go. Yeah. So if you think about, like, a little bitty baby kid that learns balance, because once they pick it up, they're just like, they're cruising.
Oh, yeah.
That's cool.
And then our balance bike also has a rear brake. It's got this little tiny brake lever on it. And so whether the kid even knows how to use it, they're exposed to it, right? So they're already starting to, like, what is this thing? So when they move to the next bike and it has it, they're like, oh, I don't know what it is, but I'm familiar with it. And so they've already learned balance. So then the next thing is pedal. and braking. And if they're introduced to braking, and they're already kind of over that hurdle. So if you take away balance from learning how to ride a bicycle, that's huge, right? You've already got the balance down. It's just figuring out how to crank your legs around now. So you take that one element out. So now kids are like, well, shit, yeah, they're riding it so young.
Right.
And, to kind of talk about, tie that back into like what we were talking about earlier with just the demographic and what the kids doing, are they playing video games and stuff? And yeah, that's definitely part of it, but they're getting into it so much earlier than we did. And then they're exposed to so much more stuff than we were, like with the internet and not only just the internet and games and stuff, but Red Bull and the X Games, and they see this stuff, and it's like the kids, like Tour de France is not, I mean, it's still a big deal, but like my kids don't even, they could care less about, the Tour de France, because that's like just a different thing. But
bunch of old guys on bikes.
X Games comes, and they're like doing these crazy jumps and all this shit, man. They'll watch that stuff all day. And then they're also learning all that stuff, and they're still biking. They're just doing it differently than we have in the past.
Yeah.
So back to Pello, and Michael, what you were talking about, like that is sort of our core thing, is like planting a seed. And if you can, that's one of the things that I used to talk about all the time too, is like, when I started the company, I would go to these trade shows or festivals and stuff, and people would come up to me and they'd be like, "Oh, this is cool. What is this?" And then they would see the price, and it was like $300 for a little bike, and they're like, "Wow!" They would balk at it. Like, I'm not gonna pay $300 for a bike that my kid's gonna outgrow in 2 years, and dude,
a hard sell.
But I mean, if you're a cyclist, you're kind of like, $300. That's what I spent on a seat post. Like, for my kid to have a great bike, that's a bargain, for somebody that rides a bunch. So that aside, but my argument to the people that would balk at the price was like, okay, well, let's look at this. So you go to Walmart, you pay $100 for the bike, and you go out, and the kid tries to ride it, and it probably doesn't work right because the brakes they're so hard to pull, or the geometry is so awkward that the kid is just like, they almost look like a carnival sort of clown on the bike or something. So, and it's super crazy heavy. So it's like, that experience wasn't great for the kid. And you put him on a good bike, like a Pello, and it's like, whoa, okay, the brake works well, and I can go, and like, so you spend $100 on the bike that the kid rode one time and thought it sucked, so it didn't want to ride anymore. You paid 3 times as much, but your kid rides it probably 20 times as much as he did the Walmart bike. So if you start if you want to do it money wise, you start putting that money out per ride. It's like, not too long, that $300 bike is like already way more beneficial financially than the $100 bike that you sell real cheap. So
don't forget.
And by the way, we have no issues with Walmart bikes, but your kids will enjoy it much better if they've got a quality bike. And I have bought a Walmart bike before. I had to put it together. Like, it was just in a box, and it's like, put this thing together, which I feel like
why that rear seat was on the front of that thing.
It doesn't even have a seat. What? You don't even need a seat. But so I hear what you're saying, and there is a lot of advantages to that. And I have children, and them having that first experience and it being a positive experience goes a long ways, because if they have a negative experience, then you have to, as a parent, talk them into that next step. If they have a great experience, then they're like coming to you saying, I want to do this more. I want to do this more.
Exactly. Let's go for a ride. Yeah,
absolutely. So if, so I'm assuming you got a website out there for the Pello bike. If I wanted to buy one, where would I go? Okay.
PelloBikes.com. Yep.
Is that PELLO?
It is.
PELLOBIKES.com.
And we'll put that on our
we
website.
Sure will.
There.
We can drop
Absolutely.
that on YouTube and
Facebook
and the podcast and everything.
One final thing I wanted to say.
Website is coming.
Cool.
Okay. One thing I wanted to say, Adam, I know something about Richmond, Virginia.
Oh.
All right.
Yeah. Do you know anything about that? I believe, if I am not mistaken, Patrick Henry said his famous quote in one of the churches there. What was it?
Oh, come
Give
on.
me liberty or give me death. He said it in Richmond, Virginia at
Churchill. Yep.
At one of the churches there.
Exactly.
So is that what you were doing?
During the
You were looking
Revolution
down at
in
Google?
1777, probably.
It turned our whole country around. Like it
That's
spun
right.
the revolutionary thing started happening.
Give me liberty or just axe me right now. But
what's funny is my son, when he was in elementary, had to recite that. And he was kind of struggling with remembering it, and he was kind of. And I'm like, all right, let's go to the church where it happened, and
there you go, it's perfect,
and experience it, from that perspective. And man, he nailed it. Like it was, I took a video of him. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was the St. Charles or St. John's, I think, church. But
they have a huge Irish fest every year, right in that little area, and the church is kind of part of that scene.
I'll have to see if we've got any listeners on our podcast from Richmond. Maybe that'll be our listener spotlight one of these days. So
well,
we'll see.
I hope after this we do, but
well, we might if he listens to our podcast. Then we've got somebody. We do a listener spotlight. So
that's right.
Okay.
Which kind of highlights a certain town. I give little hints and have people guess, and then the next episode we tell them where it was and we thank them. So
Michael's background used to be history teacher, and he brings that to the show, and we have a little fun with that where he'll say, "Do you know where that is, Adam?" And he'll go, "Oh, you remember this, don't you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I have no idea," but that's okay.
Adam slept through history. Well, he didn't sleep through because he went to military academy.
I did go to military
school. He didn't pay a
school.
lot of attention. Let's just say that.
Colonel Meredith, I don't know where you are now, but that's 2 times that you've been mentioned in 2 shows. So, listen, we've been talking with Shane Cusick, and Shane, I appreciate you coming and giving us some of your time this evening. I highly enjoyed talking to you about Bike Virginia, where it was, where you guys are looking, and I see Bike Virginia right now. BikeVirginia.org is the website. Nothing new there right now. It's still showing last year's ride, but any idea when someone might want to take a look at maybe when you might be willing to announce some things?
Yeah, hopefully sooner than later. That's sort of one of our things of, like I was saying, 30 plus year of doing certain things. It's like, all right, now we got to pivot. We got to do these things. And it's like, all right, how do we structure it? And so we're in the background working on the website and planning these events. I'm not sure exactly when we're going to launch it out.
That's okay. I mean, I'm enjoying the drone footage here. Whoever
I know.
Whoever
that was a fun year. That was one of our that was Glenmurray Park one of the years.
That's cool.
That was a cool ride.
But Shane, we certainly thank you for your time, for coming on and talking with us. And certainly we would appreciate it if you'd relay any updates on Bike Virginia to us. We'd be happy to get those out to our followers. And anytime something comes up new with Pello Bikes, certainly let us know. And, if you come out with something, the latest and greatest or something, maybe we can have you on a future show just to talk to you about kids biking and the Pello Bikes that you guys make and things like that. So I think that'd be awesome.
Absolutely.
That would be awesome.
I'd love to touch base when we do the next batch, when the next batch of bikes comes out. So this summer.
Yeah. Keep us informed. We'd love to have you back.
Yeah, for sure. I so thank you. And I know we've played back and forth emails, and this was definitely worth the wait, and this was a lot of fun. I really appreciate your time.
Yep. Thank you.
Me too. I had a great time.
Thank you so much.
All right, guys.
Okay. Well, listen, listening to that again, I always enjoy when we do interviews like that. I mean, gentlemen's building bikes and developing rides. I'm a little bit sad. I mean, here we always talk about rides going away. And so that's never a great feeling, but I thought the interview was great.
Yeah, it's a great interview. Interesting to learn about, a segment of bikes that we don't really think much about, other than, hey, there's a Huffy down at Walmart or whatever. But I like his concept. I like his idea. I think he's got a good, business model from what I can tell. So wish him all the luck there. And it was a great interview. Sorry, I apologize. It got a little long, but again, when we're having these, it's a conversation and we just let it flow. So,
I mean, Joe Rogan has 4-hour episodes, so we're not as that bad.
yeah, but we're also not Joe Rogan.
Hey, dude. Remember what we learned at Podfest? We can say whatever we want. We are the #1 cycling podcast.
Well, we very well could be, actually. That actually might not be pushing the envelope.
So, true story, and then I know we're going to get to listener spotlight and end this, but so we went to one of these breakout sessions, and I'm sure all of you have been to some sort of conference or listening session or learning session or something, whether it be small to big or whatever. We're in a room about, would you say like 200 people?
Yeah.
So we're sitting there, and this lady stands up on stage, and she said, "Hi, I'm so-and-so from the #1 podcast." And nobody blinked an eye, and she kept going, and she's like, "By the way, did you all believe that I was from the #1 podcast?" I was like, I did. Why would I not believe you? And she's like, "You can say whatever you want. I mean, your listeners are the only ones that are going to call you out. It's not regulated." And I was like, I told Michael, by golly, we're going to start saying we're the #1 cycling podcast.
Yeah, but then you get into some moral
we
and
do have some
credibility
updates.
things, but I mean, honestly, we're probably pretty high up there in cycling content. So,
well, if you do your research, there is a lot of downloads, so I love it. So, sure never thought we would be here, my friend. And
Yes.
this is a lot of fun. So,
yeah. So we're not going to lie, but we could be the #1 cycling podcast.
it could be.
Possibly.
Well, I know one thing. We're the #1 podcast in this household. So,
Well, we are the #1
that-
cycling of leisure podcast. I will guarantee that. So,
that's
all
true.
right.
That's true.
what do we
All
got
right,
to
here we
wrap
go.
this up?
Ladies and gentlemen, it is now time for Listener Spotlight.
All right, we're going to wrap it up with this, with the clues for this listener spotlight. This town was founded by English settlers. It was settled in the early to mid 1600s. The town's first economy was driven by farming and fishing. Starting in about the mid 1800s, actually 1840, the railroad came to town, which helped spur its economy towards recreation. So starting in the mid 1800s, this became a recreational destination. The town is named for a location in England. And this town is one of the oldest towns in the state.
St. Louis.
Yeah, because we all know that in the mid 1800s, St. Louis developed became a recreational destination.
Well, it's always good to be with you, buddy. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, maybe a little earlier than that, it was a destination, but certainly not recreational. It might have been destination to, actually that'd have been about right. Head out to California. So they weren't going there for recreation.
Led Zeppelin sang a song, "I'm Going to California."
Yes. But
listen, on
there we
that
go.
note, I appreciate you always doing the research. Appreciate you bringing that to the table. We do have some updates. We've got some big brag updates. We've got jersey updates. We've got all kinds of things to talk about. But we know this one's long. So please, in 2 weeks from now, please join us. We'll give you all the updates, everything that you ever want to know about cycling men and women of leisure.
Maybe not everything, but we'll give you a lot.
Hey, and you know what today is?
Yeah,
It's
definitely
a great day for a bike
for a
ride.
bike ride.
All right. Have a good day, my friend.
Hey, you too. We'll talk to you later.
Hey, we just wanted to remind you that we've got some really cool products at our jersey and our swag store.
That's right. You can visit cyclingmenofleisure.com. At the top of the page, you'll find our stores page. Click there. There's 2 QR codes. The one on the left has a J on it. That's the store for the jerseys. The one on the right is just a swag store. Has all kinds of different items kind of customizable. You can kind of make the swag the way you want it. If the QR codes are giving you an issue, don't worry. Underneath, there's 2 buttons that you can click on. Thank you, and have a great day.